Good morning.
You gotta mute everyone here.
Good morning.
Good morning, all. I'm going to make sure that we have our computers set up correctly before we start making announcements or appearances. And let me just go ahead and verify everyone that I show that's involved in the hearing today. I see and hear Mr. Knoll. Mr. Knoll, you can see and hear me okay?
I can, Your Honor.
All right. And then, Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Josh Carpenter.
Yes, sir. I'm here. I'm just trying to get my camera up and running.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to send you an invite, a little prompt that may pop up something on your screen to let you join. There you go. All right.
There we go.
All right. And let's see. We also have Mr. Clement. I see Mr. Clement. Mr. Clement, you see and hear okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Donaldson, you see and hear okay? Looks like you're muted, Mr. Donaldson. You'll have to unmute yourself. Mr. Donaldson, can you see and hear okay?
Can you hear me now?
I can. Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. And then Miss Deborah Johnson.
Yes, sir. I'm in with Lonnie Cluck. He's just on my computer. We're on behalf of the city.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And then what about Mr. Eisen? Mr. Eisen's not showing that he has audio capability, but it does show video capability. Mr. Eisen, I don't know if you can hear me, but we cannot hear you. And then I also have an unidentified phone number that ends in 841, 903-841.
That could be the city. We're listening on my phone because my microphone is not active. I don't know why it's got us on there twice. I can get off of one.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
That's our phone.
All right, Mr. Voss, you can see and hear okay?
Yes, Your Honor, I'm here.
Okay. All right, so basically I've just admitted everyone who was in the waiting room. I have several phone numbers that I can't identify. So if I don't identify you and you're appearing by phone, I'm sorry, I'm not able to recognize you by your telephone number. So, all right, let the record reflect that we are calling cause number 19-185, City of Canton versus New Beginnings Fellowship, Houston, Covenant Community of Canton, Jamie Harbor, we'll call this et al. And ask for appearances for the record, beginning with you, Mr. Voss.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Ed Voss here on behalf of the city.
And let's see, Mr. Carpenter, it's my understanding that you represent Miss Jamie Harbor and Mr. Ellis Dean Harbor. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. And then Mr. Knoll.
Your Honor, Mr. Knoll appearing on behalf of Barney Joe Donaldson.
Okay. And do I have any other counsel that's representing any of the parties on this Zoom hearing?
That's Joe Alfred Eisen Jr.
Okay, all right. So Mr. Eisen, all right. So I can't see you, but I can hear you. Okay, Mr. Eisen.
Yeah, sorry, Your Honor, we have problems with our Zoom on telephone, but
Okay.
I don't need video.
Okay, all right, all right.
Excuse me, Your Honor, this is Michael Martin. Just letting you know I'm here listening but not participating in the hearing. I'm counsel for the City of Canton.
All right, thank you, Mr. Martin. Yes, I see you there. Okay. All right. Rather than me try to go down and discuss what was said on the docket today, it's my understanding that there may be some kind of agreement in this case. Is that correct, Mr. Voss?
Yes, Your Honor, that is true. And
Okay.
as a result of that agreement, we filed yesterday several documents to non-suit numerous parties, leave as defendants the parties that are the owners of the property and the representative of the property. And we have entered into a stipulated agreement, stipulated permanent injunction, and final judgment that we've submitted to the court. I will apologize and take responsibility for not getting it to the court sooner than yesterday. I don't want to share too much information, but day before yesterday, we buried my father-in-law who died last week of COVID. And so He was a full-time caregiver of my mother-in-law, which burden has now fallen on my wife. So I've been a little bit distracted, so I apologize for taking longer than I had anticipated to do this.
Well, condolences with you, Mr. Voss. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And I assume it's probably because of the late filing. Whatever has been filed, I have not seen any of it. So I would have, at least for Mr. Donaldson, one question. Does it non-suit Mr. Donaldson?
If you don't mind, Court, I'll go ahead and answer that.
Yes, sir. Mr. Voss, go ahead, please.
Mr. Knoll, yesterday we filed a non-suit of Mr. Donaldson, New Beginnings, Covenant Community, Chapman House Eustis, Kevin Chapman, Donna Bega, the New Beginnings Church that was owned by Ms. Harbor, so that the only defendants that remain in the case are Dean Harbor, Jamie Harbor individually and is doing business as a Rise Church, and the structure on the property in Rim. We also filed yesterday withdrawals of both motions for contempt, so that we have withdrawn those matters. And then we entered into a stipulated, agreed motion to enter a stipulated final judgment that does not involve any of the parties that have been non-suited.
Okay, now, last question on that issue. Is that a with prejudice?
The non-suits are without prejudice.
Okay.
We've withdrawn the motions for contempt.
Okay. Judge, the only thing I'd say is, obviously, since I've seen none of these documents, I'm not asking the court, well, one, the non-suit is a ministerial function, so I think the court pretty much has to autograph that, but I have not seen any of the documents, and I'm not blaming counsel. We all know this process these days is you have to wait till it gets through the process in the clerk's office. I'm happy with it at this point, but please understand I've seen none of the documents as of the time of this hearing, which is now 9:09, I think.
Mr. Knoll, I'll be glad to email them to you as soon as I can this morning.
Okay, thank you.
And the court did receive those and review those yesterday, and the court did sign the non-suits and the orders on the withdrawal of the notice of the motion to withdraw the contempt. So the court did sign those, and you're correct, Mr. Knoll. It takes some processing time to get back to the clerk and have that delivered back to the parties via e-file. So,
Your Honor, this is Joe Eisen. May I be heard for a moment?
yes, sir. Go ahead.
Is this hearing being reported?
Do
we have a court report?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, we are appearing online in the official 294th online district courtroom. We do have a court reporter, and it is being streamed on YouTube, and it is also being recorded to the cloud.
Okay, under Baldwin versus Clanky and other cases, the announcement of Mr. Voss is all that I need for my two defendants. When you announce a non-suit in open court, that's binding. So, and I agree with Mr. Knoll that it's a ministerial function, but we believe that the announcement on the record protects us, whether the court has filed these papers or not, or if somehow they haven't been filed yet. The appearance with a court reporter should protect us. So that's our position. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Judge, just one other thing. I did get an email from Wynette sometime yesterday. I don't remember what time, but that did indicate that there either was or was going to be a non-suit file. So it's not it's not a surprise. I just haven't seen the documents. So I wanted that clear with Mr. Voss also.
And so, Mr. Voss, if I understand correctly, the city has entered into an agreement with the remaining defendants, those being Jamie Harbor, Ellis Dean Harbor, and the property in Rim, Arise Church, regarding a permanent injunction. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, that is correct.
So once the court sees that, when you anticipate that'll be presented to the court?
I actually submitted it to the court yesterday in addition to the agreed motion.
Okay, I'm not
So-
sure if I've seen, if I've seen the permanent injunction. I know that I saw the non-suits, so I'll go back and review that. And so,
It was, excuse me, Judge, it was filed, the agreed motion to enter the stipulated permanent injunction and final judgment was filed yesterday. And it had a joint stipulation attached to it along with other exhibits as well as the stipulated final judgment. Then the joint stipulation was filed separately and the stipulated permanent injunction and final judgment were submitted as a proposed order behind the motion. So maybe that'll be helpful.
that will be helpful. I know I did not review those things, those items. And you negotiated this injunction with Mr. Carpenter as counsel for Jamie Harbor and Ellisteen Harbor. I know that the court had appointed Mr. Schmidt, Richard Schmidt, and Mr. Mitch Adams to represent Mr. and Miss Harbor on the motions for contempt. But it's my understanding that Mr. Carpenter is now representing them in the non-contempt aspect. Is that correct, Mr. Carpenter?
Yes, sir. And
All right.
and for what it's worth to the court, I represent them and their church in all matters.
Okay. All right. So at some point, I do want to address the court-appointed attorney fees that are going to be submitted to the court by Mr. Knoll and the Harbors, and wanted to know if y'all have reached an agreement on the county recouping its money that is expended since the withdrawal of the motions for contempt have been submitted. Because Miss Harbor and Mr. Harbor indicated that they were indigent, applied to the court reviewed that, conducted a hearing, and appointed counsel. Neither Mr. Schmidt or Mr. Adams are present in this hearing today, but they were appointed in the same means that Mr. Knoll was appointed for Mr. Donaldson. So at some point, I want to make sure that any agreement between the city of Canton and the remaining defendants that we make that allocation. Any objection to that, Mr. Voss?
No, Your Honor, that's fine.
Any objection to that, Mr. Carpenter? And I don't know what those bills are going to be. I can imagine that they would be too exorbitant because they've only been appointed for a couple of weeks.
And candidly, Judge, I don't know if they even spoke to the Harbors at this point. So Mr. Voss and I began this conversation. Mr. Voss, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was about a week and a half. And we've been working towards the resolution for the last couple of weeks.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So, So the court will go and we'll review that stipulation and Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Voss, you're asking the court to approve that and telling the court that will resolve the litigation in this matter.
Yes, Your Honor. On behalf of the city, as plaintiff in this case, it will resolve it.
And as well for the Harbors, Your Honor. Thank you.
And so at this point, as Mr. Eisen has stated, he is satisfied with the non-suits, and those have been signed as the court has announced on the record. And so that does remove Mr. Donaldson and New Beginnings Fellowship of Houston and the Covet Community New Beginnings of Canton. With that being the case, then if there's nothing further before the court, then the court will go and review the stipulated permanent injunction. And if I have any questions about that, then I may request a phone call meeting with you, Mr. Voss, for the city of Canton, and you, Mr. Carpenter, for the Harbors and Arise Church.
Yes, sir.
All right. Is there anyone else that needs to be heard or wants to be heard by the court at this time?
The only thing I would have, I'm going to be out of town till actually next Wednesday. I'll submit something to the court as far as my bill. Court already knows that I'm not one to stick the city or the county on my billing, but I'll get something to the court sometime towards the end of next week.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Knoll. I appreciate that. And I'll take that up with Mr. Voss and Mr. Carpenter once we get all that information in. All right. Well, if there's nothing further, then I'm glad that we were able to make a resolution in this case, and don't know what that is. I'm anxious to go read about it and see where we have fallen on this. So there being nothing further than for the court to consider today, the court will adjourn this hearing, and if we have any issues, I'm sure you'll contact my coordinator, and we'll make arrangements to get another setting. I appreciate everyone being able and willing to call in or log into this Zoom hearing, and hope everyone stays safe.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All
Thank
right.
you, Judge.
You're very welcome. We're adjourned in this matter.